Uh, okay. I'm today is what, 31st of March. I'm sitting here in Oslo, and Haukur is in what, Tønder in Denmark. How do you pronounce that in Danish? Tønder, no?
Tønder.
Tønder. Okay. What does it mean?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. How do you say it? When you are making fire, you use a certain thing to get the fire up. You put together two things. Yeah, that's the tinder.
Tinder. Okay, is okay. Interesting.
Yeah,
and I've been wondering about it, and it's very close to the German border.
Yeah, that's why I moved to here.
Okay.
In the beginning, I was working with a ceramic verksted, work in Nibel in Germany, which is a small town not far from here.
Yeah.
So I was working with the ceramic people to make this check pieces.
Yeah. Okay. And that's based upon the Greenlandis or the Inuits.
Yeah.
Do you have one of them with you there?
Yeah, I have two downstairs.
Okay.
These are the only one in the world, because in the end we couldn't make them.
Okay. Too complicated.
So maybe, well, that's another story.
So
what?
We can. I think we should take a specific Q&A or a program on that, because I've seen them and they're really wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, but
this is as a big fan of your art, this is one of my favorite pieces here.
Oh boy, that was a great one.
This is the original piece. No,
yeah.
You have a wooden piece, which is the original one.
Yeah, in the beginning, this was made in wood.
And there is a big statue in Iceland, which is somewhere in Iceland.
Yeah, in Mythology, it's on the south coast of Iceland.
Okay, and then do you know
what?
How big is it? How tall is it from?
The wheel, as you see it there,
yeah,
is 2 meters.
So the wheel from down here up to here is 2 meters, and then this is maybe 2 meters more, so it's about 4 meters up.
Yeah, it's about 4 meters high.
Okay, so the reason why the reason why we are here is I wanted to talk to you a little bit about you personally. One of the interesting things, and just for full disclosure, I am the eldest child of Haukur, the artist whom I'm talking to. Yeah. And I'm amazed by the things that I don't know about my father. I've been researching a lot from his past. He was a pioneer in advertising in Iceland, came from Denmark with new way of thinking, and specifically with focus on kind of industrial design and design around packaging and things like that.
Yeah.
And I am now in that industry. I'm in the advertising industry and I appreciate the craftsmanship, because everything is done now in computers.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, you originally made your own fonts. You were kind of making everything on yourself.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah, but then the computers came and you decided to become an artist. But you're using computers quite a lot now, aren't you?
Yeah, I could say that I'm a specialist in Photoshop. I like that program, because you can make many things in this program.
So yeah, so these guys, for example, here, these are, you draw them first, then you take them into Photoshop, and then you play with them.
Yeah, then I print it out, and then I put it onto onto some material, and then I saw it out. And
yeah,
this is only a beginning, because Wow, there's a story behind these
Yeah,
dwarfs.
I know, I know. Well,
Oh,
but tell me a little bit about yourself and your career and your studies and your professional life. I mean, you've done so many things.
oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Wow. I don't know where to begin. Yeah, I remember that you told me once that I used to put you when you were a little boy, a small child even. I put you into my desk, you know, one of the drawer,
Yeah.
and you were sitting there and making something with me.
Yeah.
The same thing my father did to me.
Okay.
He put me into a drawer in his huge. He had a huge drawer, a desk, you know, and he was making these things all the time. He was always making something,
Yeah.
and he mostly was making small ships.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and I loved it. So that is in fact my beginning, and then his brother Laurus, he was he is he is a very nice or was he's dead unfortunately, but okay. And I was there a lot with them.
So that was in Grímstad Holt in South Iceland.
Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
very beautiful place, and I was making there many things for his daughters, my cousins. You know, they had a dollhouse, and I had made a big dollhouse for them, and with furniture and everything, and we just loved to I loved to do this thing. That's when I was maybe 7, 8 years old.
Okay.
So yeah, that's one of. I remember these years. They were beautiful. Then I did many things. I was
If we dwell with Laurus a little bit,
yeah
he was, if I remember correctly, and he told me this, that he was the head of the Reykjavík theater, and he started a lot of interesting things around culture and art.
yeah oh
And
yes oh,
and while you were there, because of his relation to culture and art, there's a lot of philosophers and actors and artists that came to visit him, and you sat there and you kind of drank it all in.
yeah. I was sitting in the corner and listening. That was beautiful.
Yeah,
And yeah, Laurus was the manager of this theater.
yeah.
Yeah, what was the name of it? Leikhús Reykjavíkur, já.
Reykjavík Theater or Reykjavík.
Yeah, and he was translating many known theaters.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Plays.
yeah, play,
Yeah.
and they were showing it, of course, and he was all in this thing.
Yeah. How I mean, it is clear that you started to show interest into drawing, and you were quite creative as a child. There have been books written about you as a child by Icelandic authors, and there's interesting stories behind that. But you go from there, you go to the Icelandic College of Art and Crafts, but it didn't fit you. Why was that? Why didn't you kind of?
Well, I didn't like it. It was something, I don't remember how it was, but I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I was there for half a year or something. And then my father said to me, okay, you should go to Copenhagen.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, well, and he sent me to Copenhagen and gave me a little money to have with me. And then we arranged the thing, and I was there in a school to learn more or less, many things in art.
Yeah.
And well, that was quite okay. And one of my teacher, Mr. Graffer, I was thinking of quitting and go away. I didn't,
Yeah.
you know, I am something like, you know, how can I say it? I am individualist, you know, and I like to do it myself.
Yeah.
So I told Mr. Graffer that I would like to go and try myself, and he said, no. You come with me and you work with me in my workstead. He had a special, you know, place, and he was traveling nearly all over in Copenhagen.
Yeah.
And we were making many things with shops, you know.
Yeah.
What is utstilling? What the hell is that?
Yeah. So showcasing things in the windows and
yeah. In many kind of shops, you know, and that appealed to me because you had to use your imagination.
Okay, so you started to being kind of a props. Designing in shop windows illustrations of products and related items.
Yeah, many
but
things.
How did you like? But I know that there was a lot of industrial design behind it, because when you came home to Iceland after being in Denmark, you started at one of the largest, or if not the largest, printer in Iceland, and it became kind of you and a couple of other people became the advertising agency of Iceland and for that company.
Yeah. My friend, when I was in Copenhagen, in that same school, there was a Norwegian guy, Mr. Egil.
Yeah.
Nurheim.
Yeah.
And we could work together, and we were learning silk screening in that time together.
Yeah.
And so I told him, well, why not you come with me to Iceland and we will put up an advertising firm or something. Yeah, and he said, okay, yeah, let's do that. And we did that, and for about 4 or 5 years, we were working together.
So he was in Iceland with you, working, and you kind of founded this agency together.
Yeah, okay. That was the beginning.
Yeah,
beautiful, and we made many things. Then I met a guy in Copenhagen. There is a big firm in Reykjavík, which were specialized in emballage, you know, in
boxes and
boxes and so forth.
Yeah, packaging.
and I moved my advertising firm into that firm.
Okay.
So we made a deal, you know. I was drawing emballage or whatever boxes about fish, about everything. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, you were doing package design. You were doing both large scale and small scale designing logos and
everything.
But around that time is when you meet my mom. And
oh boy, yeah, that was a beautiful time.
But before we go into that, you also worked a lot into porcelain and glass.
Yeah. This man in Bragi, his name was Bragi.
Yeah.
He was a manager in Copenhagen in this you know, box fabric.
Yeah.
And we put together. Then we put up a firm where we were silk screening on glass.
Okay.
Or in porcelain. And burning it in and everything. And that was very nice. We were at that for quite a time.
Yeah.
And that was beautiful. Wow.
I remember you have a set of diaries which I have somewhere stored, and in one of the diaries you're writing about this adventure with Bragi. But I remember also you were buying the house or the apartment that we lived in when I was born, and you wrote in the diary that the apartment cost the same as a door that was being bought for the Parliament of Iceland.
Yes, 720,000 Iceland kroner.
720,000 kroner. Yes,
I still remember.
But in that article, in that diary, you're also talking a lot about Bragi and your partnership and gleropostulin, which basically means glass and postulin, and the things you were doing together. And still today, if you go into houses in Iceland, you can find porcelain dishes made by you. They were kind of household items.
Yeah, and more, because they are also in Norway.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, because Bragi moved the firm. He bought me out because I wanted to go another way.
Yeah.
And he bought me out, and he moved his glass and porcelain to Trondheim.
Yeah. Okay.
In Norway, in a little town near to the Trondheim, which has the name Malm.
Okay.
And he put it up there, and I was drawing up things for him still, and he was putting it onto the porcelain, and he was selling it in Norway.
Your connection to Norway is interesting because you go to Denmark and you meet with Egil Norheim, who becomes a friend of yours, who sadly passed away some years back, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Bragi also, he moved to Norway, but then you were also a sailor, and you came to Norway a couple of times as a sailor.
Yeah, that was before.
Yeah.
I was a seaman for about 8 or 9 years.
Yeah.
On small fishing boats or trawlers and the bigger ships, sailing to Norway, yes, to Germany, and wow, that was a beautiful time.
I remember stories that you told me about one time that the boat that you were on was so icy that you had to stay up for days to
that was terrible.
To chop off the ice, because if you wouldn't do that, then the boat would tip.
It would sink.
It would sink, yeah, because of the ice. It would just.
Yeah, we were fishing near to Newfoundland.
Yeah.
And that was in January.
Yeah.
Which is a dangerous time there.
Yeah.
Because the weather, well, it's bad. It can be very bad. And the freezing was about 40 degrees, and it was windy. And then when the ocean comes up to the ship, it freezes on the ship, and you have to knock it off. Otherwise, the ship will just sink.
Exactly, and these are stories which I've been reading also in your diaries. It's been quite interesting. So one thing, so after 20 years of being an advertiser, a madman, that's a reference to a TV program, old school advertising agency guy. You moved to becoming more like a designer or a creative or an artist, but before we go into that, one thing was actually I learned later is that I was watching Lord of the Rings, a extended version, and I saw they were showing books and different things from around the world, and then I noticed looked like drawings that you had done, and then he told me that you actually illustrated the Icelandic version of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, that was something. Well, the thing is that in advertising business, I call it a rat race.
Okay.
Because we are always competing with each other to get the best firm. And then you are selling yourself a little bit, you are paying under the table and everything like that, blah, blah, blah.
But
so
But Gunnhildur has an interesting Gunnhildur has an interesting twist on this. She says that those who become artists, they don't have to sell their soul.
Yeah. Well, no, they don't have to. You
Okay.
are more or less free.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. So after 20 years in advertising, you decide to become an artist, and your focus was quite early on mythology and mainly maybe Icelandic folk art.
Yeah.
Why was that?
I just liked the stories, you know.
Yeah.
There were stories about trolls and dwarves and things like that, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And also the Icelandic mythology, or the Nordic mythology, I should say. It interested me, so I began to draw it.
And does that tie into your interest into heathen or Ásatrú or yeah?
Yeah, that's I more or less like what I was trying to do was to show people how interesting it is, really.
Yeah.
So I just used about, well, let's say, a few years just to study it.
Yeah.
And
Talking about studies, you're quite well traveled. When I was young, so you have a sister who sadly passed away, but she moved to the U.S. And she was living either on the reservations or by reservations for Navajo Indians, Native Americans, and you and my two sisters went there. I sadly couldn't go, but you spent a couple of months with them and the Navajos and learned a lot from kind of Native American art. And then you've been to China, you've been to Greece, you basically have traveled quite a lot. What stands out when you look at that from both personally and as an artist?
Well, it was very interesting in New Mexico.
Yeah.
With the Navajo Indians. I was learning sand casting, making silver jewelry, and all that thing. And well, yeah, that was very interesting. And then I was in Greece, in Corfu, and we were making jewelry there in silver. I was working with a silversmith in Corfu.
Okay.
And then I met Ragnar Baldursson, and he is now in China, in Beijing. And he said to me that I should go to China. And it was another way. I asked him if he could arrange a visit to China because I wanted to learn a little bit what they were doing.
Yeah.
So he arranged that because he was at the embassy and he could arrange that. And I was in China for about 6 months. And that was interesting. Wow. The Chinese people. Wow.
Well, I have, in a similar fashion as you, I have traveled quite a lot. I've been to I think 26 countries, speaking at conferences and so on. The main takeaway I have from those travels is that we should never judge people based upon where we stand, because there's so much culture, there's so much things that are happening that we don't have a clue about. And it's probably the wrongest thing that we can do is to try to normalize people towards our culture or what we think is right or wrong, because we don't have the full picture.
Yeah, that's quite right. I found that out very quickly. That I learned to listen.
Yeah, that's important.
I had to listen and look.
Yeah,
observe. And see what they were doing, and wow, it was so interesting.
What about if we go back to Ásatrú? The first time I met with the founder of Ásatrú, or heathen religion in Iceland, Sveinbjörn Benediktsson, was I woke up one morning, probably 6 years old or something like that, probably less, and I went into the living room. There was this guy sleeping on the floor, and he had a big beard like Santa Claus. And I ran into the room, and I woke you up and said, Dad, Santa Claus is in the living room sleeping, and in the living room sleeping. What should I do? And you told me to go and pull his beard. Which I did, and I pulled his beard, and he woke up, but he had this very interesting laugh. He laughed very had a very interesting laugh, and I remember that that's the first memory of Sveinbjörn. But you and him had the same birthday, 4th of July, and you kind of became good friends.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that and how that influenced you from maybe from as an artist, but also.
Yeah, he was well, a very interesting person.
Yeah.
And he had the notion of us to tell people a little bit more about our culture.
Yeah.
Our old culture, our heathen meaning and things like that. You know that heathen means actually a clear thing.
Heiðni, heiðskýrt.
Yeah, heiður himinn. It's the same thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, well, I didn't believe in Thor and that thing. That was another thing. I just like the stories. I like the background and everything. How our ancestors, how did they think?
Yeah.
So that was interesting me.
So from my first memory of you, it's been an interesting adventure. I remember when I was maybe 10 years old, waking up. We had a house which was on 3 floors, if I remember correctly, and overnight you had built a racing platform for my Matchbox cars, where I could put the cars on the top, and then I could run down the stairs and see they go down.
Yeah.
So this was a constant adventure, and how you were working with paper and how you were working with different formats in building things up. I remember when you were working with Einar Thorsteinn and building up the dome houses, or based upon Buckminster Fuller, which I know Einar was a big fan of, and I think he met him.
No, well, we invited him.
Invited him, okay, yeah.
We invited him to Iceland.
Okay.
When we had me and Einar and the third cousin Friðrik.
Yeah.
We established a school.
Yeah.
What do you call it?
Drawing school or art school or yeah.
Yeah, to teach people to draw.
Yeah.
And then one day we decided to, because Einar, he wanted to meet this. He had actually been in Dallas, in America, and he met Buckminster.
Yeah.
And so he phoned him and told him to come to Iceland.
Yeah. That's very typical Icelandic, just to take up the phone and
Yeah, and Bucky, he said, yeah, wow, yeah, that's an idea.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, brilliant. I remember also that with Einar, I'm not sure if Friðrik was a part of that, you made Astro Spilið, or the Astro board game, but before you had the Útvegsspilið, was what would be in English would be the sea industry board game. So a bit like Monopoly, but happening in the sea industry. Which was
how much can you fish?
Yeah, sell and buy fish. Fish, start by going out, getting the fish, and then sell the fish.
Yeah.
And that became quite a hit in Iceland. You sold out couple of years in a row. You couldn't print enough.
We were millionaire for about 3 weeks.
Yeah, and another thing I remember, there was a small flaw in the game where you could actually deplete the money. So you had to issue $1 million, $1 million, what it called, bills because you needed more money into the. It was actually an interesting time. But you spent about what 1 year and a half, 2 years on board games.
Yeah.
And
I did. and that was an interesting time.
So it was you, Einar, Thomas Thomasson, and Jon.
Jon Jonsson.
Jon Jonsson, yes, that was interesting. And if I remember correctly, you were able to get the sea minister or the Ministry of Seas, the minister for the.
We invited him to play with us.
Yeah, exactly, and that's exactly. But so all of this accumulates to different, and I can see in the back there that you have some art, you have some pictures there, and this is the Viking ship there in the back, and the mask in the back there, and I know that if people visit you in Thunder, they will be able to see a lot of designs and a lot of templates and models that you've been building. If we take one specifically, that is the Arctic hens.
What? Wow.
That is the largest outdoor.
This one.
Yeah. And that is the largest outdoor art piece in Iceland, but it hasn't been finished yet. So tell me a little bit about that. That's 20 years ago that you or something like that, and you played with that. But initially it is Einar Erlingur Thoroddsen who asks you to come. He's living in this small town.
Yeah, it begins like this, you know. When this firm we call Viking Circle, it was stationed in an old farmhouse just outside a small town called Hafnarfjörður. Strömur is the name.
Yeah.
I was building there a huge model of the Edda, the world of the Edda.
Yeah.
And this man from the northeast coast of Iceland, he was a hotel manager there, and he came to visit me. And he saw these models. I had been making many different models, you know, of many things. Mm. And he said to me that he would be interested in if I had some idea to get some tourists to this small town in the northeast coast of Iceland. And I said, well, yeah, I will have to come there. And so we arranged that, and I visited the place. And he had the notion of making a sundialer out in where the lighthouse was, and he wanted to use the lighthouse as a bender to show the time, you know, with the sun. Mm. And I said to him, well, no, we are not going to do that, because we can find sundialer all over the world, thousands of them, and nobody is interested in coming to Iceland just to look at that. Yeah. So we will have to make something far bigger and far more interesting. So he said, well, what? As usually, a good idea, it comes up, you know. I don't know how it happens, but I asked him for a little paper, and I had a pen, and I draw up the main idea at the place.
And it's all somehow connected, because the characters that you built this on, the way that the Arctic Hands is built, the dwarfs which are around it.
This here.
Yeah. The dwarfs around it. This is all connected, and it ties into Also, the book that you and Gunnildur, the book and the cards, the Nordic divination cards that came out last year. It ties together because it plays heavily into mythology, into the Norse mythology or Germanic mythology.
Oh yes.
How did that? Like, you've been working on that book or the drawings there for probably 15, 20 years plus, because I've been kind of seeing you. I've been seeing this more or less, for the past 15, 20 years.
Yeah, I was beginning on it. You know, I was designing a restaurant in Hafnarfjörður with my friend Johannes.
Yeah.
And he wanted to have some kind of new thing, because his restaurant, he had newly bought a restaurant and it didn't go well.
Yeah.
So he was asking me if I had some idea to put up some gig around it. And I said, yeah, well, let's make a Viking restaurant. And so, okay, we began to, I began to draw it up, and then we showed it to the authorities, and they said, yes, go ahead, you can. Johannes, okay, he built that thing, and this restaurant is today one of the most successful restaurant in Reykjavík, in Iceland.
Yeah. And it has brought a lot of interesting sides to it, because there's this.
That's when I was beginning to think of drawings to put up in the restaurant from the gods. And then I was drawing up and making, pictures for the restaurant, and we hanged it up. And then all of a sudden I said to myself, hey, let's draw up all of these identity, or these characters which are in our old mythology.
Yeah.
So there it began, and that was about 2000 or something like that.
Yeah, it's earlier actually. I remember.
Maybe
in 1993 or four maybe.
Yeah.
It goes back. It goes back further. So as an artist, and I'm just trying to think how I can summarize this up. There's a lot of things that we have skipped. I mean, your career spans more or less 70 plus years. If you go all the way back to the dollhouse making in South Iceland, so it's probably close to becoming 75 years. And working on the Yggdrasil cars has been something which you have been quite fascinated by, and seems to kind of accumulate into seems to accumulate into kind of a summary. But there's a lot of stuff that you're working on, and I can see because I also have a backup of your computer that I can sometimes see that you're 4 a.m. doing something. And you told me once that sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night and you dreamt something, and you basically just stand up and you start working on it.
Yeah. It happens, yes.
Yeah. But so, as I said, we can't cover everything now, but maybe we can go deeper into some of the other things. But what is Haukur the artist working on now?
There was in the old days, they had a special calendar. Every farmer, every individual even made their own calendar called prímstaves. And they made the calendar, let's see now, where is it? There, yeah. It looked more or less like this.
Yeah, but bigger.
Yeah, but in different sizes. And they had these peculiar signs of it. The summer, and on the other side, the winter.
Okay.
And then they made marks for each day. And I did see it in Norway in the beginning. And then I traveled around a little bit to look at it more thoroughly.
Yeah.
And I was in museums looking at it, and I was saying, wow, this is something. So I decided to draw them up and make something out of it. Wow, it's a story. Come on. And I am working at it now.
So basically, what it is that Primstavir is or prime runes.
Yeah.
Is a rune for every day, which you have been gathering over the past 20, 30 years, or even longer. And what you're building now is basically a rune calendar, your interpretation. That is playing into.
This is one of the sketches, you know.
Yeah. So that's the rune for the 3rd of January is a boat. 4th of January is the sky. 5th of January is a mouse.
Yeah.
Why a mouse?
Well, in the old days, a mouse was. They said these people in the old days, they looked at the mouse like a very clever thing.
Okay.
So they had a special mouse day.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And now I am working at this at this calendar, you know, and I'm making picture for every 6th day.
And then each week has a specific art to it.
Yeah. In this case, it is here.
Whoa. Okay, that's interesting. So there's so much to take from, and it's been brilliant. Probably we'll deep dive into something more, and we'll tackle if we get any questions or anything like that. We can take that on. Let's just say this is good enough for now.
Yeah.
And thank you for doing this. Brilliant. And of course, I know some of these stories, but they are always fascinating.
Yeah, you cannot. It's impossible to make all the stories in 15 or 20 minutes. It's impossible.
No. We'll look into that. I've already thought about great topics that have come up, and there are some fond memories.
I also think that if it is done, I cannot remember everything I have been doing. Come on, wow. And I can absolutely not remember when I was doing it.
No, but interestingly enough, though, the diaries have been super helpful. You kept diaries for maybe 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
Those I have been reading once in a while, and they are actually quite fascinating. And then I've been going through old news clipping archives. And looking at things that you were doing as a young advertising agency person.
There was Christian. There was when we were in Strömur, Álverið, you know.
The aluminium factory.
Yeah, they had they printed special books or paper for each year, and we are in one of these books. What we were doing in Strömur.
Yeah.
I don't remember when it was, but
no.
Well, that's another thing.
Yeah. But there are a couple of things that come to mind which we haven't covered, and we can look at that later. But thank you.
Okay. Bye all.